Hey everyone, this is your host Aditya, and I guess I'm back with another vRealize automation tutorial. And this time, we're discussing approval policies as well as the different notification scenarios that are present inside vRealize automation. So, as you can already see on the screen, we are inside a tenant called dev-dry cloud with a user that is called Aditya_an. I guess whose account that is. So, without wasting any more time, let us discuss something that we're here for, and that is approval policy. So basically, an approval policy is used to govern whether a service catalog user needs approval from someone in your organization to provision items into your environment. So in case you're worried about a user provisioning some items, you can apply approval policies that are corresponding to that user or that item and many other options, so that whenever that item is requested, an approval request goes to an approver, and the item will only be provisioned when the approver approves the approval request. I'm getting good at this. Now, if you can remember from our roles and responsibilities video, the approval policy can be created by the tenant admin or the approval admin. So make sure that you have the tenant admin or the approval admin roles before trying to create an approval policy. Now, let's just start making one. First, you need to go to the administration tab. The first option that appears on your left side is the approval policy. Click on that. If you have clicked on any other tab, do not click on that tab. Just get to approval policies and start making a new one. So here we are going to be able to create approval policies. Just click on the new button. As you can see, there are two options available while creating a new approval policy. First, we can create an approval policy of a certain type. If this option is selected, there are multiple types of approval policies that can be created. You can create a service catalog request or simply a catalog item request and multiple options. You can just go through them at any point you want. But for now, we'll be going through catalog item request. But before that, let us also see what we can do when we can with the select an item option. So when you click on the select an item option, you have a set of items on which approval policies can be applied. So basically, these all items can be blueprints or software components, depending upon what we have already been, what is already present in our environment. You can also search for items or for an approval policy type as well. For now, let us just click on the catalog item request. Click on OK, OK, OK. So now we need a name for our approval policy. What would be a good name? Bingo. This sounds like a very creative name. Now, let's give it a description. Provide a description in case so that if anyone is looking into the approval policies, they would like know just by looking at it what that approval policy has been created for. What is the need for that creation of the approval policy or what it does. See, here's the status. It can be draft or active. Now, only approval policies that are in the active state can be entitled to the users. And active approval policies, you cannot edit an active approval policy. When you create an approval policy, you can add pre-approval and post-approval levels. So first off, let's just make it an active state, make it into active state, and we'll talk about the pre-approval as well as the post-approval phase later on. uh, I've set this to an active state, and on the right hand side you can see the policy type. This is the one that we selected while creating the new approval policy. Also showcases the item as well as who updated this approval policy last and when it was updated on. So these two phases, let's talk about them. First off, we have the pre-approval phase. and then we have the post approval phase. Now, when a request is being provisioned, if a pre-approval policy has been applied on that request, then before the request goes into provisioning phase, this approval policy will be there. And the approval has to be accepted before the request goes into the provisioning phase. As for the post approval, if you apply a post approval policy on a request, the request will be provisioned, but the approval policy has to be approved before the item is released to the end user. Now, you can create multiple approval levels for an approval policy. That's what you can see here. Now, these can be multiple, and each level has to be approved before the approval goes to the next level. And all of the levels have to be approved before the approval request is successful. So only if all the levels have been approved, your approval is confirmed and your machine goes into provisioning. So let's just try creating some levels here. And for now, we can also create a post approval or a pre-approval policy. But for now, let us just create a pre-approval. Okay. First thing that this pre-approval level wants, just remember that this is the first level that we are creating, is the name of the level. I'm just going to name it level 1. Now I'm going to describe it the first level. Yep. The next option that we see down here at the bottom is, when is this approval policy required? Now you can either have it as it is always required, or you can have this approval policy based on a set of certain conditions. Let's see. Now, these conditions can be based upon if a single condition is true. If we define a number of conditions here and all of the following conditions are true, then this approval policy is work. If any of the following conditions are true in case of multiple conditions, or if none of the following conditions are true. You can have a lot of as you can see, you have a lot of options here. Let's just say the requested catalog number. That's what I selected, right? Oh no, the requested catalog item. And we have an option of equals to. There are two options available in the value field. You can either have a constant, you can just give the name of the catalog item on which you want this approval policy to work, or you can select field. Now, if you select field, you will have to define the field values. What this allows us to do is, let us say you have a catalog item and you only want an approval to be there when people who have a common manager, let's say A is the manager of 10 people in the environment, and you only want the approval to be done when the manager is A for the end user who has made the request. So we can define the field values, and based upon these field values, this approval policy will work. But we are not going to make it that complicated. We are just going to make it that this approval policy is always required. But I just wanted you to know this stuff so that when you see it, you know what this thing is doing, what this thing will allow us to achieve. So let us just make it to always required. Now, on the right hand side, you can see the approvers for this request. Now, you can either select specific users and groups. You can just add a group here. You can just add a group here in the search tab, and you can select it. And when the approval request has been, like the condition has been triggered, the request will go to the approvers that are defined here. Or you can determine the approvers from the request. If you click on that option, you can again define field values, and based upon the information that the request has, you can determine the approver based upon from the request that was provisioned. It can either be based upon the requested by or the requested for, and you can just make a combination and ask a certain user to approve this request. Or you can use event subscription. Now, what this thing does is that it processes the approval request based on defined event subscriptions. The workflow subscription must be defined in administration event subscriptions. You create pre-approval and post-approval workflow subscriptions so that you can send an approval request to an external system for processing. So basically what this thing is doing is, there's a workflow which sends this approval request to a third party system, and until the approval request has been approved or a response has been received by the VRA from the third party system, the VRA will hold its provisioning request. It will hold the provisioning request. So this is what the use event subscription does. But for now, we're just going to make it use specific users and groups. And a friend of mine was helpful enough to let me know about his user account. This is not going to happen in an enterprise environment. And I'm just gonna input his name, search for him. Yep, there he is. So Rohan Bajaj is going to be an approver for our requests. Now, these two options, anyone can approve and all must approve. Uh, if you want to understand this thing, you can have multiple approvers in a single level of approval in a single phase. That means if there's a pre-approval, and for the level one, you can have 3, 4, 5, or 100 number of users. Now, this option allows us to select, like, if the level will be satisfied if a single user will approve the request, or you want all of the users to approve the request. I'm just going to make it anyone can approve as of now, or I can select all must approve because I just have a single approver. Easy for me, difficult for you. Okay, so I guess our approval policy level has been created. Just click on OK. So here we are. I'm just going to make sure that everything is all right. Seems okay. Good enough. Just click on OK, and we have an approval policy ready. Now, after you're done creating an approval policy, you just need to link this approval policy to an entitlement. You must already know what an entitlement is from our previous tutorials. If you don't, just go through the tutorials, man. And let's just see where we were. Let's select an entitlement and link this approval policy to one of them. Let's see. Okay, so here are the entitlements. Let's see, we have a test entitlement already been created. And let's just go to items and approvals. And for the entitled service, let us select an approval policy which will be applied to these selected items. Oh, this is already the test service that we wanted to create an approval, that we wanted to attach the approval policy to. Let's just modify this one. And we're going to select an approval policy for this service. Yep, there is the tutorial approval policy that we created. Let's just click on that, click on OK, click on finish. Now, to check whether our approval policy is working or not, let's just request a catalog item. So here I am on the catalog tab. Since I applied the approval policy to the test service, just go to the test service and try to request a catalog item. I've already created a catalog item, that is the tutorial blueprint. So I'm just going to request this one. Just provided a description, the reason for request. Okay, so here we are. I'm submitting my request. Okay, so my request has been submitted, and to track my request, we'll just go to the request tab. Now, as you can see, the tutorial blueprint that I requested, the status of it shows that it's pending approval. This is because an approval policy has been applied on this request, and now it requires the approval of an approver. So before we do that, I think I forgot to show you guys something that was very important. So let's just get back to approval policy. Where's our approval policy? Yep, there it is, test approval policy. Let's just get into that. And here's our first level. Let's just change this to inactive. It states that some entitlements have been linked. So let's just remove these entitlements because what I'm about to show you is very important. And let's just replace all of these entitlements with none. Just remember that since the request has already been provisioned and it's in pending state, so approval will happen. But for any other request that will happen since the approval policy has been made inactive, this approval policy will not affect it. So there we are, just made it inactive. Let's click on that. It's the first level. Get to that. Yep, here we are. I showed you the level information, but I did forgot to show you the system properties and this custom properties tab. You guys should have asked me about that. So what this allows us to do is, if we have a certain set of system properties or custom properties defined here, what the approver can do is, let's say if a request is there for 6 GBs of RAM, but we have allowed the approver to change the value of RAM in system properties, or if a custom property has been selected by the requester, and when the request comes to the approver has been allowed to change the value of a certain custom property, then before approving the request, the approver can change the value of the custom property or the system property, and then he can approve the request, and after that the machine will go to provisioning. This allows a certain amount of flexibility for the users, for the approvers who are approving the request. So this was very important. I just showed you this. I'm not going to I'm not going to recreate this approval policy, modify it, and link it to the items, because the only reason I created this approval policy was to show you guys that our request goes to pending approval, and that I've already done. It's still in pending approval. So now we'll just go to the approver's account, that is Rohan Bajaj's account, and I'll try to approve the request from there and see what happens to our pending provisioning item here. So I'm already logged into his account from an incognito window. So let's see. If you are an approver, the request appears on the home tab, and there are multiple portlets, and as you can see there's nothing here right now, but the request will appear in your inbox. Let's see. Yep, there it is. uh, in the inbox of Mr. Rohan Bajaj, there's an item pending and which requires approval. So let's just click on that item. There we are, approval 36. Sounds cool. Hmm, quite an honest guy. So you have an option to approve this request, reject this request, or just cancel this and not look at this request. But we simply need to approve this one because I want to show you what happens after this. Now, since Rohan Bajaj has approved our request, thank you, Rohan Bajaj. Let's get down to business and see what happened to our request. So here we are. Let me just refresh this, and as you can see, the status has changed from pending approval to in progress. Now this machine will go into provisioning, get into provisioning, and will be provisioned as usual since the approver has approved our provisioning request. So this is how you create an approval policy and link entitlements to them. This is how it works. This is how it looks for the approver. So before we end this tutorial video, as I promised, I'm also here to show you the different notification scenarios that are present inside vRealize automation. So just get to the administration tab and get to the notifications. Now you can set automatic notification for several types of events, such as the successful completion of a catalog request or a required approval. Now, a system administrator can configure global email servers that process email notifications. Tenant administrator, Tenant administrators can override the system default servers or add their own servers if no global servers are specified. The tenant administrator selects which events cause notifications. As you can see here, there are a lot of events which can cause the notifications to be sent to the users in their tenant. Now, each component, such as the service catalog or IAS, can define events that can trigger notification, but none of them are selected by default. Now, each user can choose whether to receive notifications. Every end user is going to receive these notifications if we have made these notification scenarios active. These are not active by default. Now, users will be able to choose, but they can either choose to receive all notification configured by the tenant administrator or no notifications at all. They do not have the fine-grained control over which notification to receive. Now, some emails have links that users can use to respond to the notifications. For example, a notification about a request that requires approval can have one link for approving the request and another for rejecting it. When a user clicks on one of the links, a new email opens with content that is automatically generated. The user can send the email to complete the approval. So this was all about the notification scenarios and the approval policies. I know this was quite a long video, but this is it for today. Thanks for watching us. Bye bye.